Would you like to make a zero fray wreath for spring? That is exactly what we're doing today, and we're going to use the Nadia method. Hello my sweet friends, and welcome to DIY with Nadia. With me today is Louie, and we are ready to get started on this tutorial. For this wreath, you're going to need 2 rolls of Deco mesh. Both of the rolls need to be 10 inches in width and 30 feet or 10 yards in length. When it comes to ribbon, I'm going to be using this beautiful 2.5 inch ribbon. It's wired, of course. And then I'm going to use some leftover ribbon. We're going to make a beautiful bow. And the nice thing about a poof bow is you can use up some ribbon that you have left over and just need to get rid of that spool, along with this mesh. Now, this mesh I got on Temu, but if you're wondering where I got the rest of my supplies, that's always listed in the description box below. This mesh is one of my favorite things to use in a bow because, believe it or not, it brings a lot of elegance and softness to a bow. You'll see how my bow will turn out, and all I'm going to do is I am going to cut off 2, maybe 2.5 inches of this mesh and then use it as a ribbon. You're going to need 24 pipe cleaners for the wreath base, and then you might need a few more to hang your sign. The sign that I'm using is 8 inches in diameter. It does have 2 holes to hang this sign. For our wreath base, we are using a 14-inch metal wreath form. When it comes to our pipe cleaners, as I said, we're going to need a total of 24. That's because we're going to cut them in half for a total of 48. I do have some pink ones left over from a previous project. You guys have a fan looking at you. Look at that. But all I'm going to do is just fold my pipe cleaners in half and cut them in the center. Then I'm going to fold them in a little V just like those. And it's just going to be so much easier to grab them and put them on our little bows. Our Deco mesh is 10 yards in length, which is 360 inches. 360 inches divided by the 15 inches that we're going to cut our strips into. That will give us 24 strips per roll. Using 2 rolls, we're going to have a total of 48 strips. And the reason I say that is because in case you wanted to use more than 2 colors, maybe you're doing a 4th of July wreath and you're doing red, white, and blue, you can definitely do that as long as at the end of the day you have 48 pieces of Deco mesh. Can you have more and fill more in? Of course. The more the merrier for this wreath, and it's going to be nice, it's going to be full, and of course the best part is that it is not going to fray. Some of you may notice I do have sparklies in this Deco mesh, but I'm not using a heating tool. That's because we are going to seal both ends of our piece of Deco mesh, and it really doesn't matter. We're still going to have a zero fray wreath. If you're interested in the rotary cutter that I'm using, this is how it locks and unlocks. And it comes in a few pretty colors. I will have it linked in the description box below. And of course, you can always find it in my Amazon shop. Now it's time to cut our colorful Deco mesh. I know it looks like it's pretty much see-through, but at the end of the day, when we make our little bows and put them on our wreath, you can definitely tell the colors. And I think this Deco mesh will give a very nice softness to the wreath. For a quicker way to cut both of your rolls at the same time, what I like to do is simply overlay them. I have the colorful one and then the white one right on top. Measure off my 15 inches and cut. It's time to make our little bows. We're going to get our pipe cleaners and then let's get a set of Deco mesh. What I like to do first is grab my Deco mesh, wiggle my fingers so that the Deco mesh is overlaying about an inch, inch and a half. Then I'm going to bring it down and I'm going to have the overlap straight in the center. With one hand, I'm going to hold all of this together on top. Since it's a 10-inch Deco mesh, I'm going to put my thumb in the center so it kind of holds it all together. From the bottom, I'm going to start collecting. and collecting right in the center where it's overlapping. Flip the bow. This is the smooth side. Put my pipe cleaner on. Then I'm going to pinch and I'm going to push this back just a little bit so that I can really secure the bow in the back. Give it a few twists and there is our first bow. How adorable. Let's do the pink one. Overlap it about an inch, inch and a half, and I'm going to put it straight in the center. Hold with one finger, my thumb in the center, and from the bottom, I'm just going to start collecting. Flip the bow over, bring the pipe cleaner in, pinch it at the base, push it back just a little bit, and give it a nice seal. Few twists here. Our bow is all done. The reason that these little bows are zero fray is because one side of Deco mesh is sticking out right here, but it's a nice seal. The other side is actually on the inside of the bow. Our bows are all done and now it's time to put them on our wreath base. Our wreath base has 6 sections. We have 48 bows and that's going to give us 8 bows per section. When I do these types of wreaths, I like to turn my wreath base upside down so it sits kind of like a plate. I'm going to be attaching my bows on rows 2 and 3. Maybe you have a smaller sign, you're not planning on doing too much. I would definitely recommend making sure that the base of your bow is on row 2 and then you can just tie it on row 3. If you want your wreath to be a little bigger, then just flip that and make sure the base of the bow is on row 3. I'm actually going to do it on row 2 just because I'm using fairly light colors and I want this wreath to be a little bit more compact. Another thing I like doing is I like to do 2 colors at a time. It doesn't matter how many colors you are using, just do 2 at a time. That's going to make the colors stand out a little bit more. As you can see, I'm pulling towards the outside to make sure that my base is on row 2. And so I'm just going to do 2 at a time, and that's going to make the beautiful pink bows stand out really nicely. If you are going to use this method, for example, on an 8-inch wreath, then you're going to need a half of what we used here because on that type of wreath, you only have 3 sections, but you will still need 8 per section, which means you're going to need 1 roll of 10-inch Deco mesh that's by 10 yards. My first section is done, and as you can see, you can definitely see the pink and the white. It looks so elegant. I am halfway done. This is not a see-through type of wreath. It is really, really compact and beautiful. And now I'm going to finish the rest of the wreath. The wreath base is all done, and can you see why it's so important to do 2 colors at a time? This pink was fairly faint, but when we put on the wreath and did 2 at a time, you can definitely see it throughout the wreath. It's time to make our bow. I have my bow maker, 2 dowels. I'm going to put one right in the center and one in front of it. Let's put that to the side. Now we're going to grab that beautiful mesh. That tube right there is not glued to the actual mesh. What you want to do, just pinch it where you can and pull it out a little bit, depending on how much you want to cut. So obviously, if you want to do 2.5 inches, cut about 3 inches of the tube. And then go to the other side, and now you have nice soft area where you can cut. I'm going to go in about 1, 2, let's go over here. That's going to be about 2.5 inches, maybe 2 inches, I don't know. It looks good to me. There we go. And now we have a roll of ribbon that we can use. I'm going to start with my 2.5-inch ribbon. Let's measure at 6.5. We're going to flip in the center and start making our loops. I'm going to make loops that are about 5 inches. I don't want this bow to be too big. Every time I cross through the dowels, I'm going to flip the ribbon over. 5 inches on this side. We're going to flip the ribbon or twist. We're going to make a 3rd loop, measure another 6 inches and cut that off. We're going to come back with this ribbon again, but I wanted the base to have the main ribbon first. Next, let's bring in our mesh. Let's do a 6-inch tail. And here we're just going to zigzag our 5-inch loops. And I'm going to do 3 loops once more. cut the tail off on the other side. Now I'm going to come in with my 1.5 inch ribbon. These are the ones that are fairly low on my spool. So let's measure off 6 inches. And since this one is double-sided, we can just zigzag up. I'm going to go a little bit less than 5 inches on this bow, maybe 4 3/4 almost. So I mean, really just a little smaller, because the more ribbon you put on, the more floof you're going to have, but you don't want it just to be a big floof. You want it to be a dome. So you kind of have to go smaller and smaller so that when you pick the ribbon up, it's going to be like in a little dome or a little ball. Loop number 3. Next, I'm going to use the yellow ribbon, and this one is one-sided because on this side you can see how it's taped here. Here is where you see the design. Measure off 6 inches. And let's twist as we're going through the center. Going to go in just a tiny bit shorter than the green. So maybe at this point it would be 4.5 inches instead of the original 5. Twist in the center. Loop number 3. And it looks like I have just enough tail to do a 4th one. So you know what? Why not? Why would I waste it and throw it away if we can use it, right? Here we go. We're going to cut off that excess. And now I'm going to come in with this ribbon once more, but since the tails are on this side, I'm going to start with the tails on this side. Measure 6 inches, twist. So now I'm going a little bit shorter than the yellow, probably 4 1/4 at this point. And once again, I'm going to make 3 loops. Twist and loop number 3. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this and I'm going to make literally 1 loop. Put in a tail, make 1 loop, and then cut it off because I just want this ribbon to show a little bit in the front. Now we're going to grab a zip tie and I'm going to lift my bow just a little bit to put that zip tie through. What I always like to do is make sure to give that zip tie a few clicks, but don't make it too tight. Now we can take it off our wreath maker. Make sure that we have the center. It's beautiful. Now we're going to tighten that zip tie up, cut off the excess, grab a pipe cleaner, and we're just going to twist that in the back a few times. Now I'm going to grab a pair of scissors and we're going to do dovetails. When you're cutting your tails, make sure you're not cutting too much because you can always shorten the tails when we have our bow all set up on our wreath. When it comes to this ribbon, you really don't need to cut any tails. I usually don't, but if you want to, you can definitely do that. For some reason, I'm doing it. I mean, it's not necessary. It's netting. At this point, I'm not fluffing anything out. I'm just going to attach the bow to our wreath base. One thing I always say when we're adding a bow to a wreath is don't push it back too far because you're not going to be able to open it. It's going to stay in place, I promise. It's on top, as you can see, and I'm going to push it back just like this, not too much. I got my bow. Now let's attach the sign. And I'm going to use my good old method using 2 pipe cleaners, fold them in half. I'm going to make a little flat space in the center. 2 felt pieces. You can use ribbon, fabric, whatever you have on hand. Before we hot glue our pipe cleaners on, let's decide where we want our sign. Do we want the bow on top, sign at the bottom? Do we want this angled look like this? I don't know. I might like that. I decided to put bow on one side, the sign on the other, and then we're going to fill this space in with some greenery that I have on hand. Therefore, we're just going to flip and put 1 on top and 1 towards the bottom. Hot glue our pipe cleaner right on top, hot glue at the top, on top, and at the bottom. Our piece of felt, and just let that hot glue melt between your felt and your sign. The sign is ready to go on our wreath. Flip, going to go on rows 2 and 3 and attach, and then attaching the bottom pipe cleaners. Grabbing a piece of jute cord, I'm going to go between rows 2 and 3 right in that center, make a few knots, and then I'm going to pull it through the front. Now we have our hanging loop. To cover the back, I'm going to use one of my favorite methods, and that's by using a steering wheel cover. The first thing you're going to do is stretch. We're going to stretch really, really nicely. Then grab a clamp. It could be big or smaller. It could be a clothespin. After looping on that outside row, clamp it. Now I'm going to use both hands and just start looping it on that outside row. Without anyone's help, I was able to put it on, and I'm telling you, this clamp is the reason why, and it wasn't my idea. It was one of my subscribers who recommended it, and now I do it like that every single time. Alrighty, my friends, let's take care of that poor bow that I feel like has been neglected for way too long. The first thing I like to do is those tails. Let's get them to the side. As we're doing that, we're going to bring all of those loops up. As I'm pulling the ribbon up, I like to do these kind of twists. That way I can work it up. The bow is all done, or until I start playing with it again. I'm going to grab some boxwood next, and this one has some foam little balls on it. They're white, yellow, and pink. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bend my greenery a little bit because it's going to go behind the bow. To do that, I'm going to grab some floral wire and attach. I like to weave it through the base, grab another branch, weave it through there, and kind of keep on going in and out until you feel like your floral wire is secured in place. Lift my bow a little bit, put that in. That looks good. I looped the floral wire on one of the rows, and I'm just going to twist that in place. If you feel like the top is loose, all you have to do is grab another piece of floral wire. When attaching floral wire to the top, I like to grab a branch towards the bottom so that we're going to hide that whole situation. Twist it a few times and then loop it. I think that's going to look beautiful. Little greenery is always a nice touch. Now I'm going to do the same thing to the bottom of the wreath. And the first thing I'm going to do is bend my greenery, and then I'll attach. Here is the final look of our Zero Fray Nadia method wreath. I love the pop of greenery coming off of our poof bow. I'm telling you, this wreath is definitely ready for spring. I hope you enjoyed this Zero Fray wreath tutorial and also poof bow tutorial. I thought the wreath itself turned out beautiful. I hope you enjoyed it, and Louie and I would like to say thank you so much for being with us, and we will see you in our next video. Bye, friends. Louie, say bye. Mwah. Bye, guys.